Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're currently staring down your grade 12 poetry syllabus and feeling completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of words you have to get through, I want you to just pause for a second. We are going to reframe this entirely. What we've got here isn't just some boring list of texts to memorize for an exam, it's actually a thrilling, beautifully complex map of the human condition. Seriously, we're talking about deep existential dread, universe-conquering love, quiet everyday kindness, and the absolutely terrifying power of the human imagination.
To guide us through all this, we're going to be using the exact source you're studying from right now, the IEB Poetry Analysis booklet. We're going to decode these very pages together, completely stripping away the dry academic jargon to reveal the raw, beating heart of what these poets were actually trying to say. We'll look at the structures, the themes, and most importantly, why any of this actually matters to us today.
So here is our roadmap for the journey. 1. Restless hearts and deep isolation. 2. Love, kindness, and connection. 3. Facing mortality and memory. 4. The power of imagination. And finally, 5. Acing your grade 12 exam.
First up, Section 1, Restless Hearts and Deep Isolation. Okay, so what happens when we humans finally confront our deepest anxieties, the slow creep of aging, and that really intense need for purpose? How do we deal with the terrifying fear that our lives might just be meaningless? Well, notice how the poetic form perfectly matches the character here. We're starting with Alfred Lord Tennyson's Ulysses. Ulysses is this old king, finally back from the epic Trojan War, basically just sitting by a still hearth with an aged wife ruling a savage race. And he is deeply, deeply dissatisfied. To capture this feeling, Tennyson uses blank verse. Think of it as unrhymed iambic pentameter that mimics a natural flowing speech but still maintains a very elevated formal tone. It's literally the perfect vehicle for an old heroic king venting his frustrations because it gives his restless complaints a real sense of epic grandeur.
Ulysses' ultimate resolution is captured in this massive exam favorite, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. After complaining about how incredibly dull it is to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, Ulysses rallies his old mariners. Listen to those four infinitives: to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. They build up to this absolutely definitive statement of heroic purpose. It's a defiant refusal to just fade away, declaring that even though they are made weak by time and fate, they're still strong in will.
But, not everyone reacts to life's vastness with a sword in hand. Let's look at a pretty stark contrast. On one side, you have Ulysses, aggressively desiring to drink life to the lees, meaning he wants to consume every last drop of experience. But on the other side, we have Amin Kassam's poem, Strangers Forever. Kassam presents an observer who is highly philosophical, deeply existential, and marked by a kind of passive, permanent alienation. Where Ulysses desperately wants to sail beyond the sunset, Kassam's speaker feels completely trapped.
The entire core of Kassam's work rests on this one metaphor. Each of us is a passenger, seated in one huge compartment, all strangers thrown together by chance who travel without arriving. Life is framed as a train journey. We're constantly in motion, but we never actually reach a destination. It suggests this profound sense of futility. Even when we try to open a window in the chambers of our heart, there is a core part of ourselves that no one else is ever going to penetrate. We remain forever strangers. And it's not even bitter, really. It's just a calm, resigned acceptance of human isolation, which is mirrored beautifully in the poem's fragmented, free verse.
Moving right along to Section 2, Love, Kindness, and Connection.
So, if isolation is our default state, how on earth do we bridge that terrifying void? Well, we see that humanity connects in wildly different ways, ranging from grandiose romantic conquests to just quiet, everyday community. Enter John Donne and his poem, The Sun Rising. This is a dramatic monologue where a lover, lying in bed with his beloved, literally talks down to the sun. Notice how his tone totally evolves across the poem's 3 stanzas. In stanza 1, he shows mocking irritation, calling the sun a busy old fool and a saucy pedantic wretch. In stanza 2, this shifts to triumphant confidence, boasting that he could eclipse the sun's beams with a mere wink. And finally, in stanza 3, he arrives at a kind of tender authority, telling the sun to just shine on their bed, because their bed is quite literally the center of the universe.
Donne actually pulls off this cosmic arrogance using something called a metaphysical conceit. Essentially, he blends passionate emotion with a complex, highly hyperbolic argument. The lover's bedroom becomes a microcosm that contains more value than the entire macrocosm of the world. He claims she's all states and all prince's eye. Everything outside their love, honor, wealth, kings, it's all just a worthless imitation. It's a breathtakingly arrogant yet entirely captivating view of romantic love. But let's contrast Don's massive, universe-conquering ego with something a lot closer to home, Funawala Dowling's for Umpit. While Don dismisses the outside world completely, Dowling's speaker is actually saved by it. She reflects on a time of deep unhappiness and depression, but she isn't rescued by some romantic prince who blocks out the sun. No, she's rescued by an elderly Afrikaans neighbor who just makes her tea, wipes the counter, and speaks in those low, murmuring tones he uses for lame horses and bilious dogs.
The incredible power of that quiet connection is captured perfectly right here. Just 2 words. You guessed. In the poem's free verse structure, this incredibly short line is left totally isolated. Its brevity captures the profound shock and immense relief of being understood without having to explicitly explain your trauma. Pete offers a very practical, completely unpretentious kindness. He even sends ducks waddling over just to entertain her daughter. It's a fundamentally different model of masculinity and connection compared to both Don and Tennyson.
Which brings us to an essential question you should absolutely ponder for your exams. What truly saves us? Is it the loud, assertive defiance of external authority like we see in Ulysses and Donne? Or is it community, interdependence, and the quiet, emotional intelligence of a neighbor noticing your pain? The syllabus places these side by side for a reason, because both are incredibly valid, powerful human experiences.
That brings us to Section 3, Facing Mortality and Memory.
Because sooner or later, every single human experience runs into the exact same wall. We have to confront our ultimate end and figure out how to deal with the legacy we leave behind in the minds of those we love. We explore this heavily through Cristina Rossetti's poem, Remember. Now, to really understand this poem, you have to understand the volta. A volta is essentially the emotional plot twist in a sonnet, and it usually happens right at line 9. For your exams, recognizing the structural pivot is absolutely vital because it changes the entire meaning of the poem.
Rossetti is working with a Petrarchan sonnet structure here. The first 8 lines, the octave, present a gentle melancholic plea from a dying woman to her beloved. Remember me when I am gone away into the silent land. It's a completely natural human fear, right? The fear of being forgotten. But then, right at line 9, we hit the word yet, the volta. The final 6 lines, the sestet, totally shift from a plea to an incredible act of release. She actually gives her beloved permission to forget her. And that massive emotional shift lands beautifully in these final lines. Better by far you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad. This antithesis is the definitive example of mature, selfless love. She prioritizes her partner's future joy over her own legacy. It's this peaceful resignation to the darkness and corruption of the grave, beautifully transforming what could have been a poem about ego and fear into one of ultimate sacrifice. All right, Section 4. The power of imagination. So, from the grim reality of the grave, we move to the one space where reality is entirely subjective. How exactly does the human mind process all this dread and love and grief? Well, we turn to William Shakespeare for the answer. In this excerpt from A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is titled The Poet in your booklet, Duke Theseus delivers a deeply philosophical speech about the imagination. He uses a triadic metaphor, grouping 3 types of people together because they are all completely ruled by strong imagination. You've got the lunatic, whose mind is driven by irrational fear. You've got the lover, who projects idealized beauty onto totally ordinary people, seeing Helen of Troy in a regular face. And you have the poet, the artist, whose creative force literally gives shapes to airy nothing. Shakespeare absolutely nails this concept with one brilliant evocative line. Or in the night, imagining some fear, how easy is a bush supposed to bear? It shows how effortlessly our minds can distort reality in the dark. Imagination isn't just about writing pretty words, right? It's a highly powerful, sometimes dangerous force that actively constructs the world we experience, shaping our greatest fears and our deepest loves entirely out of thin air. Finally, Section 5. Acing your Grade 12 exam. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground today. We've traveled from the restless shores of Ithaca to a quiet kitchen in South Africa and deep into the dark forests of Shakespeare's mind. So, how do you actually synthesize this journey into high marks? Here are your actionable strategies. Step 1. Compare overarching themes. Seriously, never analyze a poem in a vacuum. If you write about Ulysses' need for action, be sure to contrast it with Kassam's permanent isolation or Umpeat's quiet presence. Step 2. Connect poetic structure directly to meaning. Don't just spot a volta in Rossetti or point out blank verse in Tennyson.
You have to explain how that structure physically builds the emotion of the poem. And step 3, always explain the why this matters. How does Don's hyperbole teach us about the private versus the public world? You always want to connect the mechanics of the poem to the broader human condition.
Because at the end of the day, guys, this goes way beyond a syllabus. You aren't just learning how to pass a test. You're interacting with centuries of human wisdom about how to live, how to love, and how to face the end.
I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to mull over. As you look at your own life and the years ahead, which truth actually resonates more with you? Are we all just passengers in a train compartment, destined to be forever strangers? Or, despite the isolation and the ticking clock, will you choose to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield? The absolute beauty of poetry is that the answer is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Now get back in there, read the text again, and see what you uncover.